as Sarah said, we work with people from all over the world, and our work is to assist them to migrate. This session's really also, as well about us, it's also about how, as I guess people in organisations, you can start thinking about sourcing overseas workers. It's not a very popular subject at the moment, 457 workers, and this slide is actually going to, these series of slides are going to cover some of the international trends in labour migration, also our program here in Australia, and also some of the issues that you may face or may currently or in the future if you're looking at developing your skilled workforce. Obviously there's lots of strategies. Sourcing overseas workers is only one. So training, recruiting from Australia is also probably the most paramount, but this we believe will still be an important part of any organisation's toolkit in terms of their human resource development. In terms of the World Economic Forum and their data, sourcing skilled workers is a major issue for most employers. So 31% have experienced significant problems with sourcing people. 65% have problems with sourcing for critical skills, and a whopping 80% of employers have problems in fast-growing economies like Australia. We've obviously experienced a bit of a slowdown recently, but the increase in our program over the last year is really a reflection of what has been an incredibly fast-growing economy. Even in countries like China and in India where we work, we know that sourcing and training people is a critical issue. In terms of world migration, over the last 10 years, the migration of labour across different countries has increased to about 42% to 240 million individuals that would be working in a country that's not their own or their home country at present, which is enormous, and that is set to increase again over the next 10 years. The majority of the flow is to well-developed countries in the OECD. And higher unemployment, though, in some markets is discouraging people, and often in fast-growing economies which are still developing, people are now returning and going home. So this is certainly the case in China, in certain areas, and in Africa even. So it's a very interesting trend. In terms of Australia's approach, the 457 program is the most rigorous in the world. It is one that has got enormous integrity in terms of, I guess, how we treat our 457 workers generally. Obviously there are some abuses, and that's been well publicised recently, but on the whole the system is so tightly managed and regulated that I would suggest they're quite few. In terms of often how, and certainly in the trade areas, people are coming into the country is through an assessment pathway, which we offer as well as others, and that requires a formal assessment of skills to make sure that people meet the requirements of the industry and for the employer, and often they actually receive an Australian qualification, as Sarah said, to ensure their employability. They also ensure that any employer, once they're recruiting someone, will have someone who'll be with them for the longer term and who will be able to meet their requirements. And our migrants have the most have the most successful outcomes, really, of any migrants in the world, which again is quite a significant achievement. Recently, and when I say recently, in the last 2 to 3 months, there's been a decrease in the number of 457 approvals, and the program has declined, particularly in construction and in mining. So since, I guess, August 2012, there's been a decrease. Before then, it was rapidly increasing. We're now seeing about an 11% fall in mining, which is interesting. And WA is, interestingly, despite all its huge programs, in terms of resource projects, is the second largest source state for 457 workers. New South Wales is the largest. And the majority of our workers come from the UK, which is also really interesting. You can see how it has been steadily increasing. It's about to probably decrease for, I think people are saying, the next year. However, the longer term trends would suggest that there will be more people coming in 2014 and 2015, and certainly they're predicting, especially in the Northern Territory, with some of their large oil and gas projects, that there will be a huge shortage, and I'm seeing somebody nod, as well as in Queensland in the construction industry. So there appears to be now some pretty solid data that there's going to be a significant shortfall in skilled labour in those states in particular. And you've got to remember that Australia has, I think, something like 7 of the world's largest projects in the world, billion-dollar projects. So even though, obviously, Browse has been shelved at the moment, there are still a significant number of, multi-billion-dollar projects that put Australia, as I said, in the top 10. And again, augurs well, I think, for the economy and probably further skilled migration. In terms of location, you can see that the states that I mentioned are the largest, and that percent of change, which is the dark blue, shows what's happened in the last year. Tasmania is huge. It's had, a 45% increase, but it's on a very, very low base, so that's not really significant. The ACT and WA and Northern Territory over the last year, you can see there's been a decrease up to, I think it's March 2013, that data. So we are seeing a decline, certainly in applications and approvals by government. It's interesting, but in terms of the industries, and they're quite small there, but construction and mining and food services are still the largest. In terms of occupations, technicians and tradespeople and managers and professionals are the largest groups that are being basically sourced. So that's 66% are managers and professionals, and technicians and trades are about 28%. The countries, there's a spread, but there's a real, I guess, concentration in terms of the UK and India. This data, I think, is a little bit more accurate. So, and the Republic of Ireland has actually also started to increase as well. The Philippines did increase in 2012, but now it's declined again. And other countries are about 25%, but the bulk is in 3 or 4 countries. Depending what happens from July the 1st, the English language requirements may change, and in that case, they're certainly being mooted in all DIAC's policy papers. Then the Philippines could also see much more of a decrease in the next year. In terms of people's citizenship, over the last year, the Irish Republic of Ireland rose by 66.9%, India by 32%, and the United States by 27%, and also the UK by 27%. A lot of the professionals are coming from the USA, and from the UK there's a much broader spread, often a lot of tradespeople coming from the UK and also from Ireland. In terms of the mining industry, though, the major source country is the UK, and it's highly significant that of 5,000 odd applications, and this is the only data we've got for the mining industry at the moment. It's up to 2011, but it was 1,320. The other figures are quite low. In terms of, I guess, when you're thinking of recruiting, what are the major issues? And they tend to be the fact that in terms of systems, skills and policies, they can be major barriers to, in fact, bringing people in from overseas. One of the critical things is that international education systems around the world are all different. Australia has, like the UK, a very strong apprenticeship system, for instance, and very strong qualification systems. In some countries, in higher ed, some countries that isn't the case, and Australia is very, very keen to ensure that people come in with comparable skills to Australians, especially given that they're going to be employed at the same rate. So one of the things you need to think about if you are sourcing, and especially large numbers, is where you're sourcing, what sorts of occupations, and what does the education system look like in that country. And there, are organisations like ours that can give you advice about that. Also, what's important is often, problems with cross-country recognition. Australia actually, as an organisation, we will go out and assess people and their practical skills in their home country. So we'll go to the UK and we'll look at a bricklayer, or we will look at a welder, and we'll actually do a practical assessment. But and issue that Australian qualification. But a lot of countries, when people come in, like in Canada for instance, they are not recognised in terms of the home qualification system. So Canada has a number of people, for instance, for China. They often are highly skilled but find it very, very difficult once they get into a country like that to get recognised and therefore to get well paid. So that's also important. The other thing is that the skill level in fast-growing economies, as I said before, is also an important factor, because countries like China and India want their own skilled people now, and they are trying to keep them in the country. They don't want them going anywhere else. So you've got to realise that Australia is not the only country that's often looking for skilled labour. There's also people in other countries or in large organisations that are obviously very keen to ensure that they keep their labour. So that's very difficult. In Australia, the importance of those softer skills like employability and language are also critical. So people's English language, the benchmarks increasingly getting higher for people to be able to come in, and the IELTS score at the moment looks like being at least a 5 for everybody, which is quite high for some countries and requires, a pretty difficult test in some cases. If you're looking, one of the things that we do is we travel all over the world, and so we get and we're often talking to migrants, and we're talking to companies who are looking in different countries to source people. The Republic of Ireland is one where, as I said, it's growing. They have an economy that's in terrible decline at the moment, huge unemployment, up to 15% for youth, and a number of people are trying to come to Australia to work. They have, as I said, a strong apprenticeship system, which is good. So they often have skills that are very similar to Australians in terms of the skills and the requirements. They are very willing to come in on 457 visas, which are quite obviously temporary. They don't necessarily want temporary migration. And they also have very good experience in, the construction industry, for instance. They have terrific skills. However, there is strong competition from countries like Canada, who are also out there recruiting madly for Irish people. The USA and Canada also are countries where there's terrific opportunities for people, and often a lot of experience in large oil and mining projects, oil, gas and mining. They have obviously very good English language skills and strong apprenticeship and technical skills training across most industries, but states differ. So, for instance, you'll find that, in terms of electrical qualifications, for instance, it's a minefield, and they will have, several hundred different qualifications across the country. So you need to work through sometimes some of those issues. Many Americans are attracted to Australia because of the high unemployment. However, they're a country with an incredibly low rate of passport holders. So there's only about 30% of people in the USA who actually hold passports, and that's amazing when you think Canada's at least 60 and the the UK is 75%. So it's often hard to attract large groups of Americans here. There's lots of problems. And I've talked about the fact that there's not the sort of national regulation that we tend to have here in Australia across industries, so there's different requirements. We've been doing a bit of work in South Korea. They have an amazing skill set. If you're looking again at sort of engineering and fabrication, huge shipbuilding culture, very high quality, but English language is an issue. The South Korean government is aware of it, and they are currently training people in English, but it's a slow process, as we all know. And they're also, though, very willing to assist people and financially if they do come and work in Australia. Again, South Korea is experiencing high unemployment with youth, and they are very keen to be working in Australia. There's also some large South Korean companies that are working in Australia at the moment with some of the bigger projects, and they're also interested in having their workers come in and work as part of those projects. The really big, we think, country with potential is India. There are large numbers of people with experience, obviously in the IT areas, in the professional areas, and also people who've worked with large projects in the Middle East. Generally, there's very good English language skills. There is often, however, a lack of formal apprenticeship training, which can be a hindrance. And there's also major differences in those licensed trades. But what's interesting about India is that for every one Australian worker, there will be 110 Indian workers that will come in over the next 10 years, will come on deck. So India and China are about the only countries with a growing workforce. Australia has a declining one in terms of skilled labour, and as I said, India is a very good one because English language is also generally very, very good. And I'd just like to finish now with, I guess, what I think is a bit of a wrap for the skilled migration program in Australia. There's often a lot of negative press about it, but, and I think, people don't often look at the statistics, but our skilled migrants have a lower unemployment rate than the national average. And they also have a lower unemployment rate than any other country in the world, which is extraordinary. They're also more likely to be employed full-time, and they earn higher wages. They pay more tax, they receive less in government benefits than the average Australian, and employer-sponsored migrants who can live here permanently earn a median full-time income of $100,000 or over a year, 40% above the median income of Australians. And in the 2009 to 10 cohort, they contributed $880 million to the federal budget in their first year. And that was 168,000 migrants. So it's pretty extraordinary. Okay, sorry, I'm going the wrong way. I'd just like to say thank you. I hope you have a lovely weekend, and we appreciate you listening.